Hi plant friends, today's video is a what's in bloom video and how I care for these orchids. First up is the Phalaenopsis Chica and Tia. This one is an amazing beauty. I'm so glad that I found this one. I actually found it at Crystal Star Nurseries back in the summer of 2017. This is the second time she's bloomed for me. Her first bloom was back in December 2020. It took her 3 years to bloom, and she's actually still hanging on to her first bloom spike. This is a sequential orchid, so I'm not cutting that old spike. It could potentially lengthen and bloom some more, or even produce some secondary spikes. As you can see in the picture, the first spike had a lot more blooms, but any bloom on this plant, I'll take it. I find that this plant likes it bright, so I'm keeping it in a south-facing window where it's getting about 4 hours of direct sun each day. Her media is orchid bark, and I water this plant twice a week. You can see on the top there's a lot of mineral crystal deposits. I'll probably need to repot this plant soon. I also give this plant slow release fertilizer. I'm using the Miracle Grow, the one that you use for veggies and tomatoes. The plant seems to enjoy that. I give her a little sprinkle of slow release fertilizer every 3 months. Although I've had this plant in my collection for quite a while and she's bloomed, she's still a baby. These leaves can get up to 2 feet in length. The leaves are so beautiful. They've got a hint of silver, very attractive. The plant has grown quite a bit for me. They're known to be a relatively slow growing orchid. I find the key to keeping this plant happy is to give it lots of bright light. It does like it more on the bright side. Early morning sun is best, then the sun's not as intense, and she likes it a bit moist. That's why I water her twice a week. She's in a clay pot, so she does dry out very quickly, and although she's being watered twice a week, she does get an opportunity to dry out in between watering. Now you might be wondering what she smells like. She is fragrant, but plant friends, she smells like burnt plastic. She also smells like, say, a fireplace, freshly burning wood. Another interesting thing about this plant is the flowers. They don't open completely. She's been in bloom now for about a month. I found this strange, but when I looked at the pictures of her first bloom, her flowers did not open completely then as well. Next up is the Phalaenopsis Shin fly eagle. So I added her to my collection back in September of 2020. She does not disappoint. She blooms about every 3 months. She's a sequential bloomer, so her spikes continue to lengthen and she continues to bloom. She's also very fragrant. Her fragrance is delicious and beautiful at the same time. She smells like tropical fruits, maybe fruit punch, and roses. The draw for me with this orchid is her flower petals. They could be yellow or they can be red, or a combination of both. You never know what you're gonna get. For this bloom, her flower petals are mostly red with a hint of yellow on some of the tips. I water her once a week. The way that I water her is by putting her in a bowl and let her soak for a couple of hours. Her media is sphagnum moss. She's also in a clay pot, so she dries out very quickly. This gives her the opportunity as well to dry out completely before watering. This orchid is a sequential bloomer, so I never cut the spike until it's completely dry. It's time to cut this old spike. For feed, I like using the Miracle-Gro slow release fertilizer. It's easy, I just sprinkle a little bit on the plants every 3 months. But last summer, I've also been using the Fox Farm Tiger Bloom fertilizer. It's a little bit more work since I've got to mix the fertilized solution, but I do a week solution on all the plants weekly. This plant is in a very sunny room. It sits on my coffee table in the living room where it's getting sun from the south and the west. The plants that are in my living room are getting a lot of sun. They get about 4 hours of direct sun in the morning, and in the afternoon they're getting sun from the west from about 3 p.m. until sundown. Next up is my 3 orchids in 1 pot, and these 3 orchids have also produced 2 keikis. Not all the buds are fully open yet. It's winter, so it's not often we get a nice sunny day. So today I wanted to take the opportunity to admire this beauty. These 3 orchids have been in the same pot for the last 7 years, and I potted them up with orchid bark. I don't know the name of this orchid, but she's a prolific bloomer. She blooms every year, and her spikes always branch. These flowers are from last year's flower spike. This year, she also produced 2 new flower spikes. Orchid number 2 is very attractive. I really enjoy the yellow flower with the red spots. Each year this orchid only produces 1 spike, not as much as the others, but a reliable bloomer. The 3rd orchid is a Harlequin hybrid, and this one's also a vigorous bloomer. This is the plant that also produced 2 keikis. This year the mother plant has 2 spikes, and one of her keikis also has a flower spike. Look at this keiki, it's gotten so big. These orchids have taken over the coffee table in my living room. They've gotten so big, there's no other place to keep them. And since they're in the living room, they're getting a lot of sun. They're getting that sun from the south in the morning, and they're getting sun from the west in the afternoon. As she matures, I notice she's been producing 2 different types of flowers. She's got the regular flowers where all her flower petals are open, but she also has flowers that are a little bit more closed, the peloric flowers. They call these flowers proloric when they start to stray from their normal look. I find this nice and interesting. It gives some variety to a basic Phalaenopsis. These orchids have produced quite a display of roots. This is a large pot, and it did not take long for their roots to start devouring the pot. After about a year, they started producing a lot of aerial roots. I did pot her up with orchid bark. You can see some of the bark protruding out of the pot. There's also little chunks of charcoal in this mixture as well. Now you might be wondering how I water these orchids. It's quite easy. I pour water in the center of the pot. There's a saucer at the bottom, so the excess water sits in the saucer and the orchid drinks that up. I water these orchids twice a week. Since it's winter, the air is very dry. They're also in a very airy mixture and lots of holes in the pot, so I try to keep them as moist as possible. I also think because it's so dry, these orchids have produced a lot of roots to adapt to the conditions. For fertilizer, these orchids are getting the slow release fertilizer every 3 months, the Miracle Grow one of course, and they're also getting a weekly solution of the Fox Farm Tiger Bloom. Our final orchid in bloom is the phal montreux. This one is amazing. It's actually fragrant. This one's also been in my collection for quite a long time, over 7 years. I initially received her as a housewarming present. She's also in a holy pot and producing lots of aerial roots. She was also potted up in orchid bark, lots of chunky orchid bark with tiny bits of charcoal. This orchid also gets watered twice a week. I try to give her a lot of water. I also have a saucer at the bottom that collects the excess water so she can slowly drink that up. The roots are nice, beautiful green when they're wet and soaking up all that water. I believe this orchid could benefit from a humidifier, but I think those are too much work to refill the water. Her bottom leaves are a little bit hydrated, but her top leaves are nice and plump and healthy. For now, she's got to make do with the excess water in the saucer. For fertilizer, she's also getting the Miracle Grow slow release fertilizer every 3 months, and she's also getting a week solution of the Fox Farm Tiger Bloom every week. This year she's got 2 spikes, but last year she had 4 spikes, 2 from the year before and 2 from last year. It was a wonderful display. The video on the right is from last year's bloom. I have it on my Instagram. Plant friends, if you're not following me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram. I've got a lot of pictures and videos of the blooms over the years. My Instagram is Life of Bellina. These orchids require cool temperatures to bloom. So in September and October, when the temperatures start to get cool, that's what tells these orchids to start spiking. Take a look at these old spikes. We've got number 1, we've got year number 2, 3, 4, 5. We also have year number 6. And our current year, year number 7. So in the fall, around September, October, and November, I try to keep my home as cool as possible to encourage these orchids to spike. Typically in the fall, my night temperatures are about 62 Fahrenheit, which is 17 Celsius, and the daytime is still pretty warm at 80 Fahrenheit, which is about 27 Celsius. So remember to give your orchids cool days and warm nights to encourage blooms. Thanks for watching, plant friends. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and follow me on Instagram at Life of Belina.